All right. So now, first things first, I did create an entry in Moodle where you theoretically should be able to see your midterm scores. But I don't know how it works. Okay, think I figured out how to put them in. I don't think I know how you are going to look at them, but if you look at your Moodle account, they should theoretically be available to you. So why don't you check that out and see if they're there, because I can't be sure myself. All I know is they're in my side. I'm seeing them on my side of Moodle, but you may not be seeing them on your side. All right, so does anyone know for sure that they're there?
Yeah, I can see my grade.
Oh, good. All right. Well, if it works for you, it presumably works for everyone. I would like to think that that's the way it works. Okay. So, all right. Now, good. All right. The next thing we need to do is now, oh, by the way, don't forget, I have to remind everybody today, a week from today, Purchase is closed. Yes, remember they chose 3 random dates to be closed to make up for the lack of a spring break. Well, Monday the 3rd happens to be one of them. And believe it or not, next Monday is May the 3rd. It's hard to imagine now. It seems like it's still the middle of April, but that's actually not the case. In fact, Saturday should be the 1st of May. So next Monday we're off. So I've been looking at thinking about planning here. And so here's what I think we should do between now and Thursday, if we can. The midterm number 2 is just chapters 10 and 11. Okay, 10 is the balance of payments. 11 is a look at foreign exchange markets and arbitrage. So I think what we should probably do is on Thursday, for sure, do the chapter 11 problem set, and then maybe do at least some of the sample midterm number 2. All right, that way we'll have plenty of time to get ready for the final. And because the final is 12, 13, and 15, although 13 is very short, 15 is not very quantitative. So the final will actually be the easiest test of the 3, which is kind of a relief. I'm sure you'll agree with that. So let's just start by agreeing that on Thursday, we can look at the chapter 11 problem set and as much as possible of the sample midterm number 2. If not all of it, depending on how the time goes. And then in the meantime, what we still have to do is finish up 15, which is our look at historical exchange rate regimes and monetary systems that have been used throughout the centuries. And we've already had a chance to look at several interesting ones, including dollarization, which you probably were surprised to learn that such a thing exists. I mean, why would a country use the dollar instead of its own currency? Well, now we know why, because it can help reduce inflation, it can help reduce our interest rates, and it's especially good for countries that are relatively small. They do a lot of business with the United States, a lot of their exports and imports, for example, and they have unusually high inflation and interest rates, which they find it very difficult to do anything about. It's kind of a way of imposing some self-discipline on the country. And so far, it appears to have worked very well for the countries that have used it. It's very unusual that a country abandons dollarization once they've adopted it, because
that's crazy.
Ability to do monetary policy, it also has so many advantages that it's very rare. In fact, I don't think anybody has ever abandoned dollarization. In fact, why don't we find out if that's the case or not? Well, let's see. This is a discussion about dollarization, or as they're calling it, currency substitution. And by the way, in principle, you could actually adopt the euro as your currency as well. It doesn't have to be the dollar or the British pound or any other currency in the world. But for whatever reason, whenever countries choose to use somebody else's currency, so far, almost without fail, it's been the dollar. According to this, the Australian dollar has been used as well. It says here the Australian dollar is a currency of Australia, and no wonder. These are its external territories. Christmas Island, which I don't know if you knew it, but there is a Christmas Island. Cocos or Keeling Islands, and Norfolk Islands. It is also officially used as a currency by 3 independent Pacific Island states, Kiribati, Nauru, and Tuvalu. Now, I'm guessing that these countries do a lot of trade with Australia, which is why they chose the Australian dollar instead of the US dollar. Now, technically, we could see Euroization, as it's called here, which means that countries give up their own currency to use the euro. But as far as I know, this has never actually happened yet. There's something, for whatever reason, the European Central Bank does not want other countries to do this. And so, you got to figure, if your country wants to use somebody else's currency and they're not happy about it, that could be a real problem. So that's why so far we haven't really seen a lot of this. The US government doesn't really care if countries dollarize or not. It's not a problem. So in fact, if anything, the US probably helped Ecuador adopt the dollar because they knew that Ecuador is in a lot of trouble and they needed to do something fast. So I'm guessing that the US may have even had a role in helping them do that. And of course, what's the difference? More than 50% of US currency circulates outside the United States as it is. What would be the problem with having countries go ahead and dollarize? The answer is nothing. Okay, that we're fine with that. Okay, so anyway, there's a lot of nice discussion here about it here right on Wikipedia, if you want to read more about it. Now, yes, okay, here we go. There are a few countries, I think they mentioned this, these tiny, tiny little countries, like for example, Andorra. It's not even a country, it's a principality, which means they don't have a king, they have a prince. And it's somewhere, I believe, between the borders of France and Spain, that's right. And according to this, they have used Spanish and French currency since 1278. So I'm going to guess that they are using the euro. Okay, but that's because of their unique circumstances. It's a tiny, tiny little country nestled in between France and Spain. Same thing with Monaco. Monaco is actually inside the borders of France. It's a principality as well. It's tiny. And I've actually been there, believe it or not. It's known for two things: the Grand Prix racing and the casinos. That's what they're really known for. That's where European royalty would go to gamble. Let's see, who else? So San Marino, I think that's near or in Italy. Let's find out. It is completely enclosed by Italy. That's what I thought. It's in, just like Monaco is completely contained within France, San Marino is completely contained within Italy. And as of course is the Vatican, which is completely contained within Rome, and they're using the euro. Okay. Well, North Korea, they don't even really have an economy there, but so these countries are actually using, to a certain degree, other currencies. Here for the British pound, we have the Falkland Islands, which is technically part of Great Britain, Gibraltar, which is a British territory. Wow, St. Helena, South Georgia, the South Sandwich Islands, and British Indian Ocean Territory. Wow. These are called Crown Dependencies. Guernsey is an island in the English Channel, just off the coast of Normandy. The Isle of Man, which is another island between Britain and Ireland. And Jersey, which is near the northwest coast of France. Okay, they use the pound. And so, now here's some countries that use the dollar exclusively. El Salvador, we've already mentioned that one. Palau, Micronesia, Marshall Islands. And here's a lot, see now here's these other countries like Bermuda. I've been to Bermuda, and you don't ever see the local currency ever. Everybody uses dollars, but they did not actually retire their own currency. So that's why they're saying here, these are countries that use the dollar alongside other currencies. And so Bermuda is a perfect example. The Bahamas, same thing. I've been there as well. You do not ever actually see their own currency. It's always US dollars. I guess the people just have more confidence in the dollar. Costa Rica, the same thing. Ecuador, of course, yeah, that's because they're fully dollarized. Although it says here they still have their own coins. What else? Panama, yes, we already knew about that one, but it does use its own coins. See now here, yes, of course, Venezuela, they're technically, people are using dollars, but that's, technically illegal. But people do use the dollar there because, of course, their own currency is worthless. And then there's a few others floating around. So, but you can see it's not all that common. And the one thing these countries all seem to have in common is that they're really small. You wouldn't get like a France, switching over to the dollar, let's say. These are all typically very small countries. And so far, it seems to be working very well. It does bring a lot of stability to the economy. And that's sort of the point. All right. So what else were we doing? Hold on a second. Let me get back to 15. Uh, 15, where are you? Here we go. So we've looked at the history of the gold standard. We've looked at several other types of exchange rate regimes, such as Bretton Woods, which of course is no longer around. These are exchange rate arrangements with no separate legal tender when they're using another country's currency, or else they're part of a monetary union. And by the way, the euro is not, I don't think the euro is the only monetary union that's in existence right now. Let's see if there's any others. Currency unions. Okay, let's see. So there have been a few before, but they're typically fairly small. It says here that we had a Latin monetary union: France, Belgium, Italy, Switzerland, and Greece. Wow, I didn't know about that one. Scandinavian, of course, that would make sense. Sweden, Denmark, and Norway. And now CFA franc, this is all of those French territories that mostly these are in Africa. And they've tied their currency. They don't actually, I don't think they have their own currencies. They just use the CFA franc. Oh, I didn't know about this one. CFP franc, French Polynesia, New Caledonia, Wallis, and Futuna. I don't know these countries. Eastern Caribbean dollar. Okay, these countries are using this one. Wow. And of course, here's our friend, the Eurozone. All 19 of the members are here. And then we have, oh, look at this one. The Singapore dollar and the Brunei dollar are managed together by the Monetary Authority of Singapore, as are Hong Kong and Macau. Then the Australian dollar, as we've already seen, is being used by a lot of these other very small territories, including Christmas Island. Okay, you all knew about Easter Island because of the stone heads, but you did not know, I bet, that there was such a thing as a Christmas Island. Well, there it is. I'm sure it's way over there. It's really tiny. Wow. But anyway, so that's those are what we would call exchange arrangements with no separate legal tender. And these are just some examples, and we saw those in Wikipedia. And of course, dollarization means you completely give up your own currency in favor of the dollar, unlike some of those countries where the dollar circulates side by side with the local currency. And the benefit about dollarization is the potential, at least, to bring price stability and lower interest rates of the country, but then they have to sacrifice stability to carry out their own monetary policy. Oops, this has to be updated. It's up to 19. They just updated that. I think we saw it was like last year or 2 years ago. They use the euro. They have no currency of their own, or they used to have one, but they gave them up in order to join this European Monetary Union, which is sometimes called unofficially the Eurozone. I'll add that here. When you read about this in the press, they usually refer to it as the Eurozone. But the official name is the European Economic and Monetary Union. Okay. Now the euro is an interesting story because all these countries had their own relatively stable currencies. There was nothing wrong with their currencies, but what they were finding is that having all these different currencies was interfering with trade. It made it more awkward to trade with each other, and it certainly made things awkward when it came time to buying foreign financial assets from each other, like stocks and bonds. And also, it was awkward for people in one country to work in another country. So the thinking was that by having a common currency, that would remove a lot of the inefficiencies in funds, financial capital flowing around between countries, goods and services, and labor. Okay, so in other words, by getting rid of all these restrictions, the Eurozone would be more like the United States, except that every country would have its own language, but the rules, the laws would be extremely similar to each other. And that should make trade much easier, and therefore their economy should grow that much faster. All right, before that, it was kind of awkward. So they decided, why not? Let's give it a shot. Let's have this common currency. And a lot of people were very, very skeptical about that. They didn't think it could last or it could work because, you know, it's kind of like you got 11 countries, which is where they started. They all have their very own different ideas about what needs to be done with economic policy. And anyway, but here it is 20 years later, and it's still going strong. So now, of course, there have been a few times when there were doubts about that, especially during maybe 4 or 5 years ago during the Greek debt crisis. There was a lot of talk that the whole thing might fall apart. But so far, it hasn't happened. So we're going to be looking at a couple of videos which explain how the euro came about and how it was created and why. But currency boards, this is the discussion about Argentina, where they basically not only gave up, well, they didn't give up their currency, but what they did was they tied it to the dollar in a very interesting way. They guaranteed that they would trade dollars for pesos at a 1-to-1 rate. So if you were a citizen of Argentina and you earned pesos, you could take them to the central bank and they would give you dollars for them. And the thinking was that that would increase confidence in the local currency, which is especially important in a country that had experienced so much inflation over the years. And the logic here was that this would help keep the Argentina's inflation rate very close to the US inflation rate, and it did exactly that. The same thing with their interest rates. The problem, though, is that, you know, let's say, face it, what happens if the dollar starts getting very strong? Argentina's peso gets very strong, and before you know it, their exports become uncompetitive with the rest of the world. And when you combine that with an enormous amount of debt, then suddenly you have a recipe for disaster. So this didn't last very long, maybe 10 years. They had to give it up in 2001 when they defaulted on their foreign debt. Okay, and we also talked about Hong Kong, which has successfully kept their peg to the dollar at 7.8 to 1 for actually quite a long time now. I think they've had this going for at least 20 years. Let's find out. I think we saw it one day and I don't remember anymore. $1983. Okay, it was that far back. Okay, 1983. So we're looking at almost 30 years. Okay, well, obviously it works because they're one of the wealthiest countries in the world. Now, with a peg, the central bank simply has to intervene in foreign exchange markets to keep their currency at that 7.8 to 1. Sometimes they have to buy foreign currencies. Sometimes they have to sell them. They do whatever it takes to keep the peg in place. Whereas with a currency board, the central bank has to hold a large quantity of the anchor currency, as it's called, typically at least is equal to the size of its own money supply, to guarantee that people can exchange the domestic currency for the anchor currency. And that's a pretty strong burden, because that money's just sitting there, and they can't really do anything with it. And we have the other cases where we may peg to a foreign currency without actually having a board. These are softer, let's say, requirements. And like, for example, the Chinese yen was pegged to the US dollar at 8.28 per dollar for about 10 years. And then they switched to a basket of currencies instead of just dollars, because they trade with everybody in the world. It's not just the US. We can have exchange rate bands so that we don't have to be quite so rigid as a traditional fixed exchange rate. We do see that sometimes with countries that have experienced a lot of inflation. Crawling pegs are designed to be readjusted every so often according to a predetermined formula. This is often necessary when a country has a very high inflation rate compared to the country that they're pegging their currency to. The example I gave was the former Soviet, well, not the former Soviet republics, but the formerly communist countries in Eastern Europe, like Hungary, Romania, and Poland, that were trying to restabilize their economy after breaking away from the Soviet Union, but their inflation rates were really high. So while they wanted to be pegged to the dollar, it wouldn't have been practical because of their high inflation rates. So instead, they created crawling pegs where they were adjusted according to a predetermined formula on a regular basis to give the market confidence that they meant what they were doing. All right, Mexico had one in the 90s, but of course in the 90s, their peso was in terrible trouble. That was when the oil prices collapsed. And so the peso peg had to be abandoned. And of course, Mexico had much higher inflation than the US. Managed float just means that the central bank may periodically intervene, but the currency is mainly influenced by free market forces. And so it will fluctuate freely, but then you might see periodic interventions by the local central bank. But yes, like Japan was the classic example for many years. They would do everything they could to keep the yen from getting too strong because they were worried that it would reduce their exports to foreign countries. And of course, like China, a lot of Japan's economic growth after World War II was based on exports. Okay, that's really how they got back on their feet, through exports. And of course, when it got to the point where their products were better than ours, like with cars, for example, that made things a lot easier for them. Okay, and the independent float means we have a floating exchange rate with absolutely no central bank intervention. All right, and we also talked about fixed and flexible exchange rates. Fixed means, of course, just what it sounds. The central bank maintains the exchange rate at a fixed rate with respect to other currencies. And of course, flexible means just what it sounds like. They allow the currency's value to be determined in foreign exchange markets through the supply and demand factors. All right, so let's see, where did we leave off here? Emerging markets. Oh, we've already went over this because Argentina, of course, had the currency board. Ecuador has dollarization. And as we saw in those lists, a lot of tiny little countries do adopt other currencies as well. And so we've already learned the sad story of Argentina. We already know Ecuador. Now, this is a very a big success story. I mean, they've kept that dollarization going for 20 years. And I've actually met people from Ecuador who told me that, yes, this has worked out really well. The economy is strong. Very stable compared to what it was back then. And so far, they have had no cause to regret it. All right, let's see. The euro. All right, so the euro, as you all know, the history of the euro, we had 11 initially countries joining together to create the European Economic and Monetary Union, which meant that they had to surrender their national currencies in favor of a common currency called the euro. Now, this meant, of course, surrendering all control of their monetary policy to the European Central Bank, which is in Brussels. So there were 11 of them. Greece tried to get in the first time, and they were turned down because they simply had too much debt. So there were 11 of them. And they all have common coins and notes, although, as we've already seen, the coins do have different designs based on which country they came from. The notes, though, are all identical to each other. And so now, in order to get into this EMU, you had to already be in the European Union, which is a free trade agreement. And so the British, the Danish, and the Swedish could have joined, but they voted it down. And of course, as I already said, Greece did not qualify to get in, although they did make it a couple of years later. They did become the 12th member, I think 2 years later. Even then, they didn't really meet all the requirements, but I guess the EMU said, well, all right, maybe they'll improve their ways once they get in. And of course, what was it, like 15 years later, they very nearly had to withdraw because their debts were getting out of control. Very out of control. In fact, they had to borrow enormous sums of money from Germany around 2015, I think it was, just to keep themselves afloat. And then they had an election right after that. And they have a parliamentary system, so they have elections pretty frequently. And so the candidate who won this election campaigned on a platform of not paying Germany back. Now that's gratitude for you. The Germans just bailed them out. And then they said, well, you know, we don't really have to pay that money back, so we're not going to. And that's the guy who got who got elected into power, so that the next time they ran out of money, it must have been very awkward for them to go back to Germany, because that's exactly what happened. So every time this happens, the Germans say to Greece, listen, we're going to give you the money, but this is the last time, the absolute final last time. So it remains to be seen what happens the next time, because as far as I know, they haven't needed any money since then. But their economy is in pretty tough shape, and it's not likely that they'll be able to hold out forever without more loans from Germany. Okay. So, I forgot. This one needed to be updated too. So Latvia, I'll go to Wikipedia. Now, I know that they mentioned it in Wikipedia. Yeah, somehow my notes didn't get updated. This is, oh, where's that list? No, this is not what I wanted. Oh, I know we saw it there. Oh, wait, I think this is the right one. Woohoo, okay. Oh, maybe not. That's right. I know that Lithuania and Latvia joined in the same year. I just want to add these here before I forget. January. Oh, okay. Latvia was 2014. And then finally, what was it? January 2015, Lithuania. All right, good. So now we have a complete set. All right. So that's all 19. Now, as far as I know, um, Poland, Hungary, Romania, it was always thought that they would try to join, and somehow it never quite happened. So I'm not quite sure what the holdup was. I think there was some combination of them not being sure if they wanted to join and not being able to qualify, because again, their economies were in really sad shape after obviously abandoning communism. So, all right, let's see if we can find something about that. Okay, let's just see if we can find that real fast. I'd be curious to know what happened with them. So why aren't Hungary, Poland, and Romania using the euro? Oh, here we go. This is what we were asking for. Okay. Oh, it doesn't say. All right. Maybe we can find out later on. All right. But yes, it was always thought and hoped that they would join, but so far that hasn't happened. Now, of course, they all have a common monetary policy. That's one of the reasons why England never joined. They did not want to give up their monetary policy to Brussels in Belgium. Um, they just didn't think it was a good idea. And so the voters turned it down. So again, what are the good things about this? Elimination of a need to exchange currencies among the members, elimination of exchange rate volatility, easier integration of financial markets, and finally, more fiscal discipline is imposed on members that tend to have inflationary policies. So Italy would be an example of that. They tended to have a lot more inflation than the other members. I don't know how much good it's doing now, but it does make it more difficult to have your own separate inflation rate, which is much higher than the other members. Now, on the drawback, of course, is the loss of independent monetary, and also it makes it harder even to conduct an independent fiscal policy because everybody is always getting together to decide what kind of policies they should have. It's not the case that each member nation is essentially independent of each other. They're all doing this together as a group. So if you don't like what's going on in Brussels, well, then that's kind of a problem because that's what you've committed yourself to doing. It's like a club where they decide what everybody will do. And you don't necessarily want to be part of that if you have different priorities than the members of that Euro monetary union. So anyway, so why don't we take a peek at our first video about the euro? Where are we? Right here. All right. Nope, not that one. Here we go. All right, let's check this out.
Create amazing doodle videos like these in any language you wish, using your favorite font, color, disability for at least 2 years. According to Royals,
All right. Well, that was pretty interesting. Now we have a much better feel of how the euro came into being and what problems it can run into. But now we have another video about the euro. Let's check this out.
And even some countries that are members of the Olympics, such as Saudi Arabia, to consider. And you do the more than 300 different events and consider members of countries. And there are absolute dreams of the Olympics. And it's such a Olympics, there's even worse than the Olympics. But if it's started to live when they see around the Olympics, it's just something that are interested in. This is a example of a super Olympics that are very
Oh, it looks like I goofed. I guess we've seen that one before, but that's all right. It was a lot of fun. I think you'll agree. Now, before we go on, I just want to mention, I think that we did not get to this at all, but I just want I'll throw this into the slides here. We have to be careful to make a distinction between two different organizations. The European Union is a free trade agreement similar to, well, NAFTA, which doesn't exist anymore, but where the countries agree to reduce trade barriers among themselves. In recent years, there has been more, let's say, it's gone beyond a free trade agreement, more integration among the members than just trade relationships. So at the moment, let me just get the list out. So it says here there's still, I'm not sure if that includes England. Let's check it. Okay, so officially the UK dropped out in January 2020. So they're counting 27 members. And you can see now the one thing they have in common, EU has 27 members after the departure of the UK in January 2020. Okay, now, of course, everybody knows what that was called. It had a special name in the media. What did they call it when England left the European Union? Anyone remember? Was known in the media. Here we go. Somebody knows. Brexit. That's right. Brexit. For British exit. And it was very controversial. It still is. Now, here's the thing, though. The European Economic and Monetary Union, EMU, also known as the Eurozone, refers to the countries that use the euro as their common currency. Now, here's the thing, though. In order to get into EMU, you must also be a member of EU. Okay, so in other words, becoming a member of the EMU and using the euro requires already having membership in the EU. Okay, so in other words, they mentioned in one of the videos that I think they said then that means there's 8 members here. If there's 27, that means 8 of them are not using the euro. Okay, so in other words, 19 of the 27 EU members use the euro as their currency, with 8 remaining in EU but not EMU. In other words, you don't have to be in the EMU. You can be in the EU, the European Union, the trade agreement, without also having the euro as your common currency. So in other words, let's see if we can identify them. So they mentioned Bulgaria. We might as well make a list here. These are the countries that are not currently in EMU. The countries that currently belong to the European Union but are not using the euro are, all right, so what do we have here? Bulgaria, Croatia, but I think they said in the other video that Bulgaria, one of them was already committed to joining. Czechia, I don't even know what that is. Czechia, I think that's a Soviet republic, former Soviet republic. Denmark never joined. That annoyed everybody. Everyone thought they would join, but they never did. Estonia, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary. There we go. Let's see. Luxembourg isn't. Oh my God. Okay, they never bothered to join. Malta, Netherlands, Poland, and there should be one more. Romania. That's it. Oh, wait a minute. Something's not right here. No, you know what it is? I think Luxembourg is in the EMU. Sorry about that. Yeah, that's got to be it. Okay. I think we're all set now. All right, that's better. And finally, Sweden. Sweden is a neutral country. They never join anything. So anyway, yeah, that would do it. Okay. 8 of them. So now these countries are not required to join, although people kind of hope that they would. I mean, but they've decided to stay outside and maintain their own currencies. Either that or they're still trying to qualify, which, and again, it's the 3 that everyone expected, Hungary, Poland, and Romania, to join almost immediately. And it never happened. And of course, the voters in Denmark turned it down. They could have been in the first group that joined, but they turned it down. And then, of course, finally, like I said, Sweden is a neutral country. Traditionally, they typically don't join international organizations. But so anyway, so in other words, when Britain, they turned down the euro as well when it was originally voted on in 1999. The British voters decided, no, we don't want to be part of that. And in fact, a lot of them were already pretty annoyed with the EU itself. So of course, now we know that they finally dropped out of the EU. And since they'd never adopted the euro, that of course made it a lot easier to leave. If they had adopted the euro, that would have made things far more complicated to get up and leave. But because they never did, that certainly made their life a lot easier, although still, there's still a lot of controversy about it. Anyway, so even though maybe this is not directly related, I found a good video about why they're talking about why Britain decided to leave. So we'll just watch this one video. Then I want to look at in more detail the Greek debt crisis, which could have led to Greece leaving the Eurozone, which a lot of people felt at the time could have led other countries to join them, like Italy, like I think Portugal was one of the ones. A lot of people felt that if countries started leaving, the whole thing would collapse. And other people felt like if that happened, maybe it would split up into a few different smaller monetary unions where the strongest countries like Germany and France would get together, and then the smaller countries would have to have their own separate arrangements. So, but so far it hasn't actually happened. So the whole thing remains intact, but you never know when another crisis might come along. And so what I'd like us to do is look at a video about the reasons why Britain decided ultimately to leave the European Union and what Brexit is really all about. All right, so hold on 1 second. Let me get this over to you. All right, here we go. Why did they leave? Oh, whoops, I sent it to the wrong place. Sorry, hold on. Let's try that again. Why did they leave?
If one big government was back, if many of them
Anyway, so yes, that's Nigel Farage. He was the one who really helped make this happen. He was so disgusted by the whole European Union thing that he campaigned very heavily in England to make sure this happened, and it just barely passed. If I remember correctly, the vote was something like 41 to 43 or something. But yes, they'd had enough of being part of this enormous faceless bureaucracy, which essentially was running the British economy from a distance. And so they finally said, that's enough, we've had it. So, but like I said before, I mean, since they never adopted the euro, that made it a lot easier to leave than if they'd already adopted the euro. So, anyway, so nobody else seems to be on the verge of leaving, although, I mean, who knows what's going on in these countries. But right now, they're the first. Now, the European Union is large and it has all these members. It's not going to collapse because England left, but it gives the others. It might give the others ideas, though. All right, and that's something that the Europeans aren't too happy about. But all right, anyway, now what I did want to do is remember I mentioned a couple of times that the Greek crisis, the Greek debt crisis of 2015, very nearly led to Greece being forced to leave the European Monetary Union. And so, in order for us to really understand how this is happening, it might be a good idea to take a quick peek. First, we'll take a look at this one video, which will explain in about just a few minutes what exactly the Greek debt crisis is all about, just so you get the background for it. All right, hold on one second. All right, just so you get a feel for what this Greek debt crisis is all about.
Hey, Jeremy Finlay here. I'm going to show you how to condense 24 months of marketing.
All right. Now, unfortunately, my computer seems to be acting up here. I think it really needs a good reboot here. And it just completely prevented me from watching that video. So if I have to reboot the computer, by the time I get back, it'll be time to go anyway. So I think we'll have to stop right here. But when I see you again on Thursday, we'll carry on with 15. And in the meantime, we're going to, hold on one second. We're going to, I just want to remind myself what I said we were going to do on Thursday. Oh, right. So on Thursday, yeah, what we want to do on Thursday is go over the Chapter 11 problem set and the second sample midterm, right? That will be our job on Thursday, right? And then, of course, we're off in the following Monday. All right. So unfortunately, I do have to reboot this computer. It's acting up, and I can't get it to show any videos. So since that takes a while, I guess we'll just stop right here, and I'll see you all on Thursday then.
Have a good day.
All right.
Thank
See you
you.
later.
Thank you,
All right.
Professor.
Bye.